The Book of Recollections, Episode 39, Council of Chaos, by Dicesylvania. Drama, a touch of romance, plenty of intrigue, and an inevitable path to war. Don't you just love a good book? Hope I kept you at the edge of your seats because our heroes are not out of the woods yet. Or should I say water? After successfully pulling out the beast from Lysander and defeating it, the group had no time to waste in getting back to Greenspring, with an imminent threat on its way to attack the city. Keith and Leo focused all their prayers on the pool of water, channeling Lunite to safely transport them to the Midnight District. But as they jumped in, something was definitely off. The world fractured, with no clear destination in sight. Their bodies felt weightless, glitching from existence. Then, the group started to be affected one by one by the turmoil. With Leo unconscious, the rest tried to focus on the fleeting images that would appear from time to time in the otherwise empty space. A dusk-lit forest with shifting lights and leaves rustling in the wind, an endless snowy expanse, a silvery dome with lunar markings and moonstones, with a choir singing in the background. Those were the options that seemed more familiar amongst the others. Having chosen what seemed like the Midnight Chapel, the group was plucked out of the nothingness into quite familiar territories. The choir kept singing, although no people were present in the church other than the adventurers. The sound seemed to be springing from the walls themselves. While Keith was tending to the wounds of a barely standing Lysander, Leo sent a message to Grace while moving towards the front of the chapel to quickly assess the situation outside. But the Chancellor was not prepared for the images that greeted him. The district was burning. Smoke was heavily rising upwards, while the scent of burning clothes and flesh filled the air. Militia and city officials were trying desperately to put out the flames, while others were dragging the injured to makeshift medical stations for already exhausted healers to try to save them. The Chancellor's mansion was being heavily guarded as a mob holding up all sorts of signs with messages like "Take down the treacherous elvish king," "Half-breed," or "Human supremacy" were stirring chaos in the streets. Jen disguised herself as a human guard to try to help some of the nocturnal casualties under severe judgment from her other peers, who were clearly focusing their efforts on the injured humans. Half an hour later, the group heard a knock on the door and a cloaked figure entered the chapel. They quickly recognized Grace, who had brought disguises for everyone there to help them travel safely through the overall chaotic streets. Taking narrow streets and alleyways for coverage, the group draws near to the now heavily guarded Chancellor's mansion, with guards turning around people that lingered for too long, while mages were pulling out all sorts of disturbing things out of the house, resembling Castiel's experiments. In an attempt to gather more intel, Jen once again disguised herself into one of the guards and started joining in conversations and asking questions after overhearing that the Midnight Chancellor had been replaced. But the guards grew suspicious of her curiosity, and before they had a chance to pursue her, they lost her tracks in the shadows. After Keith and Grace seriously berated Jen's recklessness, they continued their journey in search for the Nomad Nook, while taking in the sheer terror that was flooding the streets, surrounded by flyers warning of the Red Kingdom attack and advising people to leave the city. Through the hillside district, obscured by the ongoing chaos, the party spotted a familiar figure in the streets, muscly torso with a red aura, golden eyes with furrowed brows atop, yelling at another hooded presence with a white skull. Marthis was expressing his anger towards death, accusing him of breaking their deal. But the group did not linger, fearing their position might be exposed, so they pressed on. Through the Cloud District, finally reaching the Purple District, they spotted a barely squeezed house near the Lucky Lounge, with no sign or entrance at the front. In an attempt to distract the rest, Grace performed a somewhat silly dance while trying to conceal the button she needed to push to enter the Nomad Nook. The narrow shifting corridors took the group up the same staircases 3 times before reaching a shabby door. Inside the dimly lit chamber, a long makeshift table made out of combining several others were hosting a few other familiar faces, while some were not so well known. "Oh, but don't you just love a wholesome reunion? Even if it's under dire circumstances, but I'm curious what our knights of the makeshift table were up to before this rendezvous." As Grace received Leo's message and left to pick up the group up from the Midnight Chapel, Pax inspected Sir Oswald's letter, only to find that, while some troops remained loyal to him, others shifted their allegiance. Consulting with Castiel, the latter told the king about the undead gathered within his soulless orb and how they could be weaponized using emotions of rage and anger. Another plan would involve filling the skeletal horse with Sabath water and flying it above their enemies, spraying them with deadly substance and impeding their attacks. While Shadowfall proceeded to engulf his own orb with the Sabbath water as demonstration, Hilden had the urge to touch the water but was stopped by Shaq, who revealed his missing finger as a warning sign to the dangers of the water. The snakefolk then offered to bring in external help for the upcoming battle. As Pax and the group were putting all the pieces of the plan together, Grace arrived with the rest of the party and each took their place around the makeshift table. Pax got them up to speed on the approaching Red Army while assuring them that scouting parties and countermeasures were already being prepared. Leo was the bearer of more bad news, telling the king about the giants, led by Fenrir and a human named Eric, who were marching from Jotunvik towards Greenspring, seeking revenge on the humans. With the situation looking dire, the group scrambled for ideas to take on 2 sets of opponents at the same time, even considering spreading rumors among the enemies that the other army sought to attack them, in an attempt to pin them against one another. Tulrok claimed he had a means to communicate with the gods, pulling out a scroll and proceeding to try his best to read it. He channeled his prayers to Obscuro, seeking guidance on how to save Greenspring from the incoming foes. But the only letters that appeared on the parchment were VIM. Suddenly, in what seemed to be a trance combined with a seizure, Tulrok was given a message. When the midnight veil weakens, the Green City trembles in the silence before the storm. The scales tilt, unbalanced, as the year turns. War will stir between spirit and matter, both seeking to banish human magic once and for all. Battle must unfold everywhere in even strength. But 2 fronts have the fates undecided still. Where the market meets the chapel that gives life, flames and light will strike first and hardest. Where the fisher's stable sit by the river, shadow will rise and consume all into immortality. Yet your true enemy sits idle and ready to strike in a way you do not expect. After Tulrok came to and poorly retold the group what he had heard, Pax quickly figured out the main battlefields would be in the Cloud District, where the Luminites would attack, and the Lungs District that would be overrun by giants. As the pieces were falling into place, the Astrals made their presence felt as they appeared around the table. Even though they would be at their weakest at the time of the attack, they swore to fight alongside Greenspring against their common enemies. Pax discussed strategies, splitting the party up into two groups and pairing them with the Astrals. In the Lungs district, where the battle against Fenrir and the Giants would take place, the defenders would be Adam, Shaq, commanding the soldiers of Martis, Pax with his royal guards and the warriors of Venoris, and Leo, backed by Venoris, Saturni, and Solis. Facing Zalmoxi and the Orc army in the Cloud district would be Castiel with his undead army, his traps, and his bombs, Tulrok with Sigrid, Jen, Hilden, Grace, and possibly Shadowfall, all aided by Marthis, Mercury, and Jovis. Keith would take Lysander back to Winterheim to gather more allies, wanting to seek out Seraphine with her clan and the Night Watcher, with Lunai to secure that reinforcement while moving between the battlefields and helping civilians get to safety. I wasn't expecting them to move so quickly. I must say, I am impressed. Let's see what some of those folks do after basically having put their lives on the line to save Greenspring. After the war council was over, Shadowfall wandered in the streets aimlessly, taking in the gloom and the pressure that filled the streets as he was walking through Lovers Park. But in an alleyway, while lost in thought, he did spot an imposing figure wearing a black robe, carrying a scythe. Death spoke to Shadowfall, telling him he had no quarrel in this battle, urging him not to waste his life, to not interfere. While Shadowfall heeded Death's words, but still remained unconvinced, Death then shifted his attention towards a dying elf, plucking his soul and departing. All the while, Hilden was flying above the city looking for nourishment near a shelter for the wounded. Unsuccessful in his attempt to distract a group of 4 people, he drew his attention to a lonely teenager writing slanders about the king on a wall. Hilden swooped in to grab the boy, pulling him up in the sky to feed on all of his emotions before feasting on his brain. The same dark-robed being with a scythe appeared to claim the teen's soul while congratulating Hilden for his curiosity. Hilden bowed to his master and retreated to his hideout. During this time, Keith was gearing up once more for the vast frosted realm of Winterheim, wishing to seek more help for the oncoming battle. With the help of Lunai, to avoid the turmoil on the path to the Midnight Chapel, Keith and Lysander were redirected towards the outskirts of Greenspring in the village of Beltpelt to the humble homes of devoted followers that had a pool in their basement. With the house being abandoned, it was easy to break in. Once they located the pool, Keith focused all her energy on Winterheim. But once they jumped into the pool, they were stuck in the nothingness in between the 2 locations, with random images flickering before them. Reaching towards the most familiar one with a vast white field, they are plucked out of the void and thrown into the wintry stretch of land. Everything was silent and still, as Keith and Lysander threaded through the snow under the night sky, having no sense of direction. A stern, solemn elven woman appeared in the distance, Keith quickly recognizing Aslig, the Winterheim faith caller. But the woman seemed reluctant to lead them towards the city, despite Keith's pleas for help. Back in Greenspring, Jen, accompanied by Leo, decided to go back into the Midnight District to check on her beloved tavern, La Coque Gourmande. The district was no longer in flames, but the tension could still be felt flooding its streets, with people scrambling to seek shelter. The once fancy establishment had its windows broken, its facade almost completely destroyed, yet it was still standing tall. Once inside, Jen started snooping for a will or any other type of document that would prove that the place was officially her own. But amidst the search, Leo stopped Jen for a moment, confessing his fears of the upcoming battle, how their time together might be cut short. With a passionate kiss, he whisked her upstairs where they could spend their moments worrying only about the present. But their enjoyment was cut short when they heard someone or something shuffling downstairs. While Leo went head-on to confront the intruder, Jen swiftly retreated in the shadows to be able to move undetected. Their concerns were quickly disarmed when they spotted the face of Hugo, an old friend of Jen who was currently carrying a few boxes of liquor. After much deliberation, Hugo still refused to take Leo's parents to Nocturna Obscura, not wishing to take on such a task. Yet that still did not impede one last night of merriment together. In a different part of Greenspring, having been assigned the task of commanding the troops, Shaklashak gave the word to the royal soldiers to align in formation after their drill was completed, in preparation to be addressed by someone. With the 200 troops neatly aligned, awaiting further instructions, Shak adopted a stern and imposing look while commencing his speech. Seeing one guard in particular who seemed to scoff at his nocturnal nature, Shak decided to stroll between the troop lines, increasing his level of intimidation. Shaklashak spoke about how blood differences were of little importance if a common enemy was responsible for spilling it. His words seemed to embolden the soldier, who chanted, cheered, and whistled in agreement. Retreating towards the barracks and shedding the stern look, Shak spotted a night elf stealing from one of the barracks, quickly marching over and confronting him. Blaming his actions on a desire to help his own family, Shak told the elf he would be willing to turn a blind eye in exchange for his help to perform a spell. Reluctantly agreeing, the elf followed Shak to a secluded chamber where the snakefolk proceeded to stash the elf's wrist, letting him bleed out almost to the point of unconsciousness. After dismissing him, Shak smeared the blood all over the walls to form images that resembled the legend Livia and Fenrir, calling out to them and promising to lure his former master for them to feast on the immortal. Not too long after, he heard a knock on the door and saw Livia, the she-wolf that constantly exuded raw power, followed closely by an immense raven casting a dark shadow within the room. Oh, but look at how far they've come, all of them, each playing their part in yet another struggle, one far greater than anyone has ever seen. And here is where I must bid you farewell, dear audience. I must go forth and allow my stories of courageous heroes to embolden the people who think there is no hope, and to show them that all is not lost. And who knows, I might pick up other good stories along the way. You might even see me as the familiar storyteller at the beginning of each live tale. Until our paths cross again, I bid you adieu. This was the recap for episode 39 of VIM, as told by the Book of Recollection. I was Count Bear, your VIM recap narrator. If you'd like to join us as VIM, the Tale of Immortality premieres, tune in on Sunday at 5 p.m. UTC on youtube.com/@Dicesylvania. The recap for the previous sessions will now be told live at the table at the beginning of the following episodes. Thanks for sticking with us, good day, good night, and don't let the vampires bite.